welcome to Just Onside. It's Friday. The weekend starts here, and hopefully you'll watch this before you start your festivities for the weekend. So, firstly, OS, how's your week been?
It's been a good week, first week of the new year. But yeah, it's been good start to the year. Good to see the colleagues back in the office and what have you. But yeah, it's still pretty chilly out there. But yeah, happy New Year to you, Ayub.
Likewise. It's calmed down a little bit in terms of the weather. It is still nippy, but it is January. It is England, so we expect it to be cold. But hopefully we can warm the audience up. But before we start, let me ask the audience, all of those who are watching, which is obviously greatly appreciated, smash a like, share, do all the good stuff. Okay, so before we start, make sure you smash a like. It is greatly appreciated. Okay, right. It's a cup weekend, so there's no league games. But we obviously wanted to do a show. We wanted to talk about the Liverpool Newcastle game, but perhaps more importantly, the incident, the Jota penalty. But first, always talk about the game because I thought Liverpool were outstanding, and it would have been a travesty if they hadn't got the 3 points. Cracking game. I think it was the highest XG ever recorded in the Premier League. They certainly looked a side that was chomping at the bit. So talk about the game and then talk about the Jota incident. And maybe we can talk about other incidents, as always, that have been controversial over the last few days.
Just quick thoughts on the game, and then happy to get yours as well. Liverpool were incredible, weren't they, on Monday? We thought it'd be a high-scoring game. I think you went 4-1, I went for
Mm.
3-1, but we both thought there'll be a lot of goals in that game, and they'll probably, uh, um, to your point, when you consider the XG, I think Liverpool had 7.53. It's a ridiculous XG that, and yeah, they probably should have scored more than the four that they did. There's something beautiful about watching Liverpool play in the sense of there's a lot of movement, there's a lot of pace. I think the way I would phrase it is that they've kind of embraced this kind of chaos that is this kind of frantic nature of playing football. And it just swarms the opposition, and there are certain risks that they take. However, those risks that they take also tell the opposition that if you also want to take advantage of those little gaps that we may leave from time to time, there's also huge opportunities for Liverpool on the counter in the space. So if you look at some of the goals they scored, fantastic goals, especially that goal from Curtis Jones, everything happening in motion, fluid, people running vertically. When you do things quick, fast, and with lots of bodies moving, good things will happen. And that's what Liverpool showed. Again, well worth their result, I thought. Well worth the 3 points, although it was a game that was still somehow surprisingly 0-0 at half time. So
Mm.
yeah, incredible game. Really good advert for the Premier League as well. I thought Newcastle also played their part, but Liverpool for me were clearly a class above. Although that game did get tight, no doubt, when Newcastle brought it back 1-1, 3-2 as well. So just on the game, before I get your thoughts, I thought it was a lovely game. Liverpool well deserving of their 3 points, and look, they've got the best defense in the league. Currently, they've got the best goal difference in the league. They sit atop. They've got that gap that they'll be very grateful for now with Salah missing a couple of games. But they are well poised and well in place to go all the way, like you've predicted them to.
You're right about the game. It was a wonderful game to watch, wonderful advert for the Premier League, and it's always exciting watching Liverpool Newcastle. And you're absolutely right. It would have been a travesty. I mean, I think when it was 0-0 and when it was 1-1, I was just thinking, surely not. Newcastle sort of getting a point would have been absolutely catastrophic in terms of the way that the game panned out. I mean, I was really impressed. And it was Jekyll and Hyde performance by Salah. I think the first half, that penalty miss almost sort of typified the first half. But that's the greatness of this man, that it was quite an average first half, but second half he burst to life. He was superb. And there's a player that I want to mention that is impressing me. Virtually every single game he gets better and better. It's not a flamboyant job that he does, but it's a mighty effective one. It's Endo. And there was a few eyebrows raised when Liverpool signed him, but I think he's almost essential now. It's a sort of player that every team needs. It's the dirty job, but he does it really, really well. I think he's effective. He's very clever. He breaks up play. He keeps it simple. He does what he's sort of paid to do. But I think it allows the Flair players that little bit of luxury, that little bit of freedom, that security that he's sort of there or thereabouts. He keeps it tidy. He's like a Rottweiler. He's always at you. And I think he's somebody that is going to be essential. But like Salah, he's going to be, I think, missing for a few games. So not sure exactly how it's going to impact him. It will have an impact because he's been such a good player. So what's your thoughts on Endo? Do you think he's been somebody that surprised you?
Not necessarily, because I'm one of genuinely, I when I observe football, if you remember, they bought him off the back of that failed pursuit of Caicedo, and it was a time when they weren't necessarily scrambling. But I'm always willing to give any player a try, well, regardless of the price tag, whether it's 5 million, 10 million, 105 million. It's ultimately what you prove on the pitch, right? It's a meritocracy. You prove yourself out on the pitch, irrespective of what price tag you come for. So when they bought him, I was like, okay, let's see what he's about. Obviously got some pedigree, especially on the international stage as well, in terms of for his country. And look, I think Liverpool fans will have to correct me if I'm mistaken. If my memory serves, I think he was thrown into the game at St James's Park, actually, coincidentally, one of the earlier games of the season, as probably, I think it was his first game. Could be wrong. And I remember then, look, tidy enough. Obviously, it was a game they lost a man about 35 minutes, was it, Van Dijk? So it was one of those kind of slightly different dynamics, that different games for him to kind of play in. But he looked tidy enough. I think what has happened since then is he's become more and more used to the Premier League. He's become used to the speed of it. He doesn't look out of place. He's probably certified himself in that starting lineup right now. And I think you're right, Ayub. It's not about ultimately getting three world-class players in. Of course, you want them to be top quality. It's about getting the players for the right role, for the right fits in terms of knowing what their job is. And I think Endo's very comfortable. He knows what he has to do. There's even a certain cynical side to him in terms of giving away the odd free kick when he has to. So it's that role which you have to sometimes do, which is give the odd free kick away on the halfway line. So look, he is a really good addition. I think Liverpool have bought a really good player that I think he suits their style. Again, there's other players who can get on with it. Like, he scored, I think, some decent goals. I think was it against? I don't think it was against Bournemouth. It was one of the other games. It might have been against Bournemouth actually when he scored that. Forest, I think it was for Fulham. Anyway, but he scored that lovely goal. So he gets forward. He takes the odd shot as well. So he's very mobile. I think he's a really good addition to that squad. So you're right. He's been definitely one of the pluses, and he had a wonderful game against Declan Rice as well, against Arsenal in that great game at Anfield. So you're absolutely right. Liverpool will be there right till the very end for sure.
So I was delighted as well because we've talked about Liverpool before in the sense that they've not really hit top form. I mean, maybe I suppose the counter argument is that Newcastle are on a downward trajectory. They've got various injuries, so it's a difficult time for Newcastle. So maybe it's a really good time to play Newcastle because the philosophy is they're always going to play football, so it allows an opportunity to be perhaps a little bit more expansive for Liverpool. But I thought they were outstanding. They were excellent, and certainly a team that looks more than capable of winning the league. So I was absolutely delighted. Now, right, let's talk about the controversial moment. I mean, it in all honesty, I mean, to me, it's to a certain extent academic because Liverpool deserved to win the game. It wasn't a defining moment, but it's the penalty, the Jota penalty. We'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about obviously other incidents that have happened as well. I mean, what was your thoughts? I mean, I'll give you my thoughts first, if you don't mind. But it was a strange one because he'd beaten the keeper, and I still, I mean, I've only watched it once. I've not watched the highlight. I've not watched it again. So in a sense, maybe I need to watch it again just to be absolutely sure. But I just thought that because it's all fractions of seconds, in my mind, I thought that he probably thought that he'd kicked the ball a little bit too far. So he's had this thought, well, there was contact, albeit very slight, but because the ball's gone a little bit too far, I'll go down. That's what I thought. I mean, when I looked at it in real time, I thought that it was a strange thing to do because he looked to have beaten the keeper. The ball was there to slot home, but he just suddenly decided to go down. But in my mind, I think that he went down because he thought probably that the ball was a little bit too far for him to get. But I don't know. I mean, there's contact, but with my Liverpool bias, I'm sort of saying it was a penalty, but you're obviously going to give a slightly more objective analysis.
I'll try. And I'm glad you said that, Ayub, because look, if there's one thing I sometimes get frustrated with when it comes to football, and it's just the genuine passion, is that when we hear one another's views, it's a case of, look, try and be objective, try and be fair, try not to come at it from some sort of agenda just because you may support the team or what have you. And you try and observe it as best you can, and that's with this incident. I mean, you mentioned the fact that it wasn't a defining moment, but it was at 3-2, and it was with about probably 8 to 9 minutes left to play. All minutes counted. So I think there was still an opportunity for perhaps Newcastle to get back in the game and perhaps nick a point. Again, you're absolutely right. Liverpool were well worthy of their win. So let's put that to one side. I think, look, when I saw the incident, you try and be, like you said, fair and objective. And ultimately, we're all lovers of football. So you're always going to analyze footballing incidents and see how they kind of go on. But look, from my perspective, you know already, Ayub, when it comes to penalties, I have a pretty high threshold as it is. So John's
Mm.
already on a downer with me. I look, whilst watching the game, I remember speaking to my son. We watched the game together, and I said, whilst Liverpool were missing all those opportunities, I said it's going to need Jota's kind of coldness in front of goal, and you saw that with his assist. And can he
Mm.
prove his point? He's a top quality addition, especially from the bench, to bring off there. But as he's going through, the idea is, the first question I look at is there contact? Now, contact isn't enough for me for there to be a penalty, but that's the first box to tick, right? There has to be
Mm.
some contact, some impediment from the goalkeeper towards the forward to at least bring the question. Then does that warrant a penalty? So when you're watching it, you think, is there contact? Now, if you remember, and I don't want to go into this too forensically, but I will have to. But if you remember, Gary Neville and Mike Dean were on commentary. Mike Dean was assisting from a referee standpoint. And Gary Neville was of the opinion that it looked soft, very, very soft. And they both said, whilst the replays were being shown, is, oh, there's a clear touch, but is it enough? Is clear touch, is it enough touch? And luckily, I always think to myself, I don't need Gary Neville, I don't need Mike Dean, I don't need anybody to explain to me whether there was a touch or not. I can just go and watch the incident 50 times, 100 times. I've actually watched the incident so many, many, many times from different angles just to get a fair assessment of it. And look, the fact of the matter is, as he's going through, Dubravka goes off with his right hand to try and with his outstretched hand, and he doesn't make any contact with Jota whatsoever with his right hand. And then when you look at it, and it looks that way from the front angle, that, oh, that's where the contact is. But I've looked at it from various different angles to say, right, well, is there any contact whatsoever? I've gone in stages with his right hand. There's no contact with Jota. He puts his right hand out, right arm out, and he then withdraws it. There's zero contact with the player. What you then see is that Jota's kind of foot, and I think it's his kind of left foot, get very close to the midriff of Dubravka. And there's even a flick of Dubravka's shirt, which suggests that there may have been a flick of a touch, let's say, or some sort of light touch and what have you. So then I asked, was there contact? It's inconclusive to me. So that's the conclusion that I reach. Was there any contact? It's inconclusive. If somebody can show me definitively which contact to which arm or midriff of Dubravka, I'm happy to be proven wrong. So from my perspective, the only possible touch there was, and I say possible because it's inconclusive, is Jota's left foot towards the midriff area of Martin Dubravka. And again, it's minimal. I then asked the question, if I accept that there's a touch, was that enough to warrant a foul? Because that's the next question I'm asking, because it's a contact sport. Imagine if football,
Mm.
if every contact was a foul, each game would be about 3 months long. So look, then I asked, was it enough? And absolutely it's not the case. There's no one, if you have to squint and scrutinize an incident to find contact, believe me, save yourself the trouble. There's no foul there. That's the point I'm trying to make. So you're having to objectively analyze it in detail to say, oh, was there, oh, just a little bit of contact. Oh, it's a foul. Absolutely not. And there'll be many who argue that if you're running at speed, a little touch can throw you off balance and therefore throw you to the floor. I'm not sure that was the natural uh, consequence of effect that kind of Jota had as he went past,
Mm.
because clearly you saw that it was quite a contrived fall, right? He
Yeah.
takes some normal steps. He then thinks, and he's going to throw himself to the floor. This idea that, well, why would he? He's got an empty net. Well, why do footballers do all sorts of things? You know what? Footballers make all sorts of decisions at the best of times. Why would Rodri put his hands around Morgan Gibbs-White when he knows it's going to result in a red card? You know, like, so I'm just saying that it might not be a perfect example. I don't think the idea of, well, why would he if he's got an open goal? If you look at it, the balls, I think if you ask me, would he have finished that? I'd say 7 times out of 10. Probably. But it's a slightly, ever so slightly heavy touch. There's two guys getting back on the line. So it wasn't a dead cert that he was going to score.
Mm,
Again, 7 out of 10 is a pretty high ratio. But whatever judgment that Jota makes in the speed of things at football being played at 100% speed, I don't think we can say he was rationally thinking, oh, I've got an open net
mm,
here. I'm not going to dive. I don't think that's worthy of any defense whatsoever. So from my perspective, just to finish, I think there's very little contact, if any. I've not been able to conclusively tell that there's been some sort of contact, and then consider whether that contact would have merited a foul. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, come on.
mm.
We've got to be careful here about what football's becoming. It's got to be a foul. And if you keep giving fouls like these, that's going to result in penalties. It's going to result in very perverse behavior from forwards who'll think, well, we can manufacture a foul. We saw it with the Villa game against Burnley. No, when you're on the blind side, kick it ahead of the Burnley player, I can get a foul. You're going to encourage forwards to create opportunities and situations to manufacture penalties. And that's what that was. He's manufactured a penalty. And for VAR to give it, I was very surprised. And this idea of, well, once it's given, it can't be overturned is nonsense because we saw the Havertz penalty against United given and then overturned. And I would argue there was probably more contact in that one. So that's my view. Not a penalty for me. That's not to say the other thing can't be true as well, which is that Liverpool were well deserving of the win. Absolutely. But I'm just objectively analysing that incident.
I'm just not sure what the ruling is. I mean, I it is. Does there have to be a challenge which is sufficiently strong enough where it brings somebody down? That's the whole point. I'm not quite sure because I've got to be honest. I mean, that's never a penalty. If you're basing it on was the challenge sufficient for Jota to go down? Absolutely not, because you know that it's. I mean, you've just alluded to it. It was an afterthought. I mean, he certainly wasn't going down, and then suddenly, for whatever reasons, I mean, in my mind, I think it's because he just thinks that the ball has gone a little bit too far, so he's just thought, well, there was a little contact, I'll go down, and it's worked obviously because he's been given a penalty. But I don't know where we go from here because I'm of the opinion as well. I just sort of think that football should be, if there is a challenge, it should be, was that sufficient to bring the player down? Because there is all sorts of jostling at the end of the day for a big strapping 6 footer. Obviously, Jota's not 6 footer, but it should take quite a bit for that person to come down. I mean, it's not just a glancing blow or just a slight sort of touch coming together. So it. But where do we go? Who changes the rules? What happens? Do we? I mean, my point has always been. I mean, obviously, this is not talk about how do we find a solution to this. But I still insist that it's about time now we had ex-pros, maybe from the lower leagues. I know every time I raise this subject, people just presume that I'm talking about Premier League players. No, I'm talking about lower league players who obviously need, when they've retired, still to supplement their income. So they would be more than happy, I'm absolutely certain, to be fast-tracked. But it needs AI because anybody who's played the game, I mean, I'm always astonished that these referees, it looks as if they've never played the game because their decision making is almost robotic. They're almost it's a manual that they're going off. Oh, there was contact. Rather than look at it from a footballing perspective, because that decision, you're absolutely right. I think if a footballer was making a decision, that's never a pen because that's a guy who's dived to try and win a penalty. But talking about decisions like that, there's about 2 or 3 decisions I want to talk about. I want to talk about the DCL decision yesterday, which is obviously quite fresh. And again, I'm absolutely astounded. I am absolutely convinced that if there's a former professional footballer who was refereeing that game, that would never have been. At worst, it was a yellow card. I mean, what's your thoughts on DCL's red?
Um, it was an interesting one actually, because I didn't watch the game. But when I became aware of the incident, I thought, well, let's have a bit of a look. And again, I watched it multiple times. My understanding is that the referee didn't really give anything on the pitch. It was then VAR. that intervened, and therefore the referees then changed his mind and obviously given a red card. So not only has he then recognised a foul, but he's then recognised a red card off the back of it. It's interesting because Everton have appealed the red card. So I'm interested to see if they feel that they've got some legitimacy to get that overturned. It'll be interesting to see what the outcome of that is. I think with each of these incidents, and I'm going to try and wrap this up quickly because I'm more interested in hearing your thoughts. We have to be careful about comparing incidents. I always feel each and every single incident, penalty, red cards, goals, they're all different. There's variances and nuances that make each of them different. This idea that, well, he's gone over the ball, so, that's always been a red card, or he's caught him shin height. That's always, that kind of rhetoric. And I'm like, let's objectively assess each and every single one of them. When I look at this one, do I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin has gone in aggressively and recklessly at speed towards Nathaniel Klein? No. If you look at it carefully, he's actually gone in various different stages, if I can say. So he's kind of limped in. I mean, the one thing I would say to any striker, try and stay on your feet. I mean, not too many good things happen when you give up your feet. So that's the first thing I would say. So I think that's a learning point for the striker. What I would say is, again, has he come in at a rate of knots horizontally into the player where he may well do some serious damage? I don't think so. If you look at it carefully, he's limped into that position and then outstretched his leg. Now, Nathaniel Klein has anticipated it. So he's kind of flicked it and then kind of hopped a little bit to kind of avoid contact, to his credit. And that's a pretty natural footballing move when you see someone kind of coming into you. The question is, I ask myself, if Dominic Calvert-Lewin had made contact with Klein whilst Klein's foot was weighted on the floor, let's say, could he have done some serious damage? Honestly, I'm not sure he would have, because it wasn't that type of speed. Because you need speed for opposing forces to create a reckless action. You need some speed to potentially create a break situation, which none of us want to see, right? But we're having to kind of forensically analyze it. So from my perspective, yes, you can always be sent off for intent. If he'd gone in flying and made zero contact, I would argue that it's a red card. Why was Roy Keane red carded against Alf-Inge Haaland? Yes, he did make some contact on the side of his knee, but when you look at it, it wasn't as dangerous as many other challenges. It was a horrendous challenge, but what I mean is it was more the intent he was red carded for, because clearly he just went to do the player. So so Calvert-Lewin can still get a red card for intent. I just think it's a bit clumsy. Don't think there's any real force, and in the end he's flicked him. Now again, the flick doesn't matter; it's the intent that matters. Was it really a reckless action? I'm not so sure it met that threshold for me.
It wasn't. I mean, there's no ifs, no buts. You've covered it. It was a very genteel challenge. It's strange. It's bizarre. I mean, if you freeze frame it, it looks violent, but it's a very genteel challenge. And to your point, if there was contact, it would have been at worse a little bit of bruising. At worse, and again, I think if there is one group that is ruining the best show in town, it's the referees. VAR is, again, it's not VAR, not the system, it's the individuals responsible for it. I think this is an absolute, it's farcical. We have got something which is a multi-billion pound industry. This is not, I mean, this is something that you have to have the best professionals involved in all capacities. We have got, I think, the most incompetent officials, I think. I mean, these were probably officials that you'd see in one of the poorer leagues in the world. I'm not sure where the best officials are, but certainly this is unacceptable. And I've said it for years. Cricket is always, I mean, it may not be the most popular sport in the world in certain parts. It is, but it's not the most popular sport per se. But one thing it always does is it's a much more intelligent sport, in the sense that the players are much more intelligent, the officials are much more intelligent, and everything about cricket is a little bit more intelligent than football. They've done it for years. They've got former players who are umpires, and even when there's a bad decision, it's something that is accepted by players purely on the basis that even the best can make mistakes. But on the whole, the umpiring is of a decent standard, certainly in the UK, purely because most of the umpires that you see are ex-pros. They know the game, they understand the game, and their decision making is based on the fact that they were former players. I absolutely think is essential now. that something happens to change this unacceptable situation. I just do not think that this product, at the level that it is, can afford to have officials so incompetent and so inept, so abject that it makes a mockery of this. So certainly from my point of view, I think it's something that needs to be addressed, because every week virtually there are conversations about refereeing, there are conversations about VAR. Surely in a sport where there is so much at stake, somebody has to say, well, enough is enough. Let's draw a line. Let's look at now a potential solution. So for me, I've said it many, many times, and I'll continue to say it. X-Pros is certainly for me the way to go. Fast track them. I am absolutely convinced there's League Two players, League One players who are probably would chomp at the bit to get the opportunity.
Yeah, and I think you make some really good points there, Ayub. The only thing about the cricket, a couple of things I want to just push back on. The cricket, I know what you're saying. I just think they are two very different sports. One is played in a very kind of stop-start manner. One is played in a very fluid manner, which is football. Yes, in cricket, yes, the odd time that there are some wrong decisions, but there are, because of the nature of the sport, there's uh, options to address that, right? With reviews and what have you, so you can avoid those howlers. So in cricket, I feel like now, currently, where the sport is, just because of the nature of the sport, which is bowler against batsman, each ball is an event, as Shane Warne famously used to say. There's the opportunity where even if there's a howler, the batting team can review or the bowling team can review and what have you, right? So I feel like there's less chance for perhaps egregious errors, or at least now, in my opinion, because you have this opportunity to address that. I think in football, you're still at the mercy of human beings making a lot of subjective calls, right? Which is what Dominic Calvert-Lewin's incident was, or Diogo Jota's incident was. The only other thing I would say to that is, and I would urge anyone who loves the game, is to always assess each and every incident for yourselves, not to listen to Talk Sport, not to listen to Sky Sports reaction. You've got Mike Dean, right, on Monday night talking through the game with Liverpool and Newcastle, and Mike Dean, and this is what I mean. When Mike Dean and Gary Neville are talking about, well, there's a touch, I'm thinking, well, I'll observe it for myself, please, if that's okay. Because the fact is, Mike Dean was the gentleman who, whilst watching or doing Gillette Soccer Saturday, said Alexis McAllister's red card against Bournemouth was a red card, clear red card. 3 days later, the FA overturned it. So he was watching the game live, an ex-referee. You'd think somebody who's in a much more skilled and experienced position than I ever am, doubling down, saying it's a red card. I don't see what all the fuss is about. 3 days later, the FA overturned it, and we know it has to be pretty strong for the FA to overturn it. In the first half, you had Joe Linton clearly stopping a promising attack. We know, having watched football, you've watched more football than I have over the years. We all know that if you put a couple of hands to try and stop somebody from getting forward, that's a yellow card. We all know it. It should always be a yellow card. Liverpool get the advantage. The referee plays the advantage. I think it was Anthony Taylor. The advantage is played, and then when Liverpool fans a minute later after the move and the whole play breaks down, we come to a dead start. Says we come to a stop. He doesn't yellow card him. And Gary Neville's gone apoplectic, saying clearly it should be a yellow card, regardless. And Mike Dean's there arguing, well, he's not stopped a promising attack. We said we've watched enough football to know anytime you put two hands on someone, it's a yellow card. And he kept doubling down. It's not a promising attack. Second off, Joe Linton puts a rough challenge in and sends Ibrahim Konate flying. And when Gary Neville comments that could have been a red card because that would have been a second yellow, although I disagree with the logic in that, Mike Dean's there retracting his comment, saying, "Yeah, probably that first off one, he was fortunate, wasn't he?" I'm like, which one is it? You can't argue the law one side because he didn't stop a promising attack, apparently, which is just parachuted in there from somewhere, and then second off say, well, yeah, perhaps he was a bit fortunate. I mean, look, the only reason I say that is Mike Dean might be an experienced referee for 20, 30 years or whatever, but watch the incidents for yourself, observe the incidents for yourself, and make your own judgment calls as to whether or not you think these are actual penalties, red cards, whatever it may be. Because sometimes my biggest frustration comes with so-called expert eyes and officials and aficionados who then make your own opinion biased because you hear it from what you perceive to be a credible source. So that's the only kind of little rant that I'll go on, Ayub, that assess it for your own self. That's what I would
Well,
say.
with Mike Dean, I mean, I just think the man's a joker, really. I mean, he's an embarrassment. He stole a living when he was an official. He's stealing a living now as a so-called expert. So the sooner Sky get shot of him, the better. But enough about that, because I'm sure in a week's time we'll be talking about officiating and VAR again. Right, let's move on. We didn't get a chance, to do it at the end of 2023, but I'd like to talk about 2023 and what stood out. What was the magical moment for you in 2023? Or it could be something which was distressing for you in 2023, because when it comes to 2023, there's only one thing that I'm going to be talking about, and it wasn't pleasant.
It wasn't pleasant. It never is with you, unfortunately. That's the problem. I'm going to run through these very quickly, because I think we put this subject up quickly as what was 23 about for you when it came to football and the way you consumed it. So I think from my perspective, I'm going to go through various different angles, if you'll allow me and indulge me. So firstly, from an Arsenal perspective, because I know you're perhaps going to touch on your club, I think. But 2023, what was 2023? Well, a near miss for Arsenal with regards to the Premier League title. Yes, they were challenging there right till the very end, but they fell short. And I think they've started this season, obviously, fairly well, although they've had it difficult over the last couple of weeks. I think just the fact that after many years in the wilderness, many years of being irrelevant, they are a team building and a manager that's building where you feel like they are relevant all of a sudden. And for me, I'm not saying that justifies and that's enough, but from where they were for many years after the post-Wenger era, and even under Wenger at the very end, I think Arsenal have come on leaps and bounds. So the fact is, my team's relevant again. They're dining at the top table, trying to challenge for honours, and that's the first step. So I'm very pleased about that. City treble, I think it goes without saying. I think City finally winning the treble, I think solidifies Guardiola's status, let's say, as the preeminent manager of his era. I'll let you give your own thoughts on that. But look, it was Man City have been good enough, haven't they, over the last 4 to 5 years to win that trophy, Champions League trophy, that is. They finally did it with the 1-0 win, Rodri obviously proving the winner. I think that it is deserving of that team, of that manager, of the performances that they've put forth in terms of walking the league and some of them, and pushing obviously Liverpool very close, and Liverpool pushing them very close. So I think the Man City treble, rivaling their neighbours from 1999, will live long in the memory. You covered VAR and officiating. I'm just going to quickly run through these, but I thought you covered it really well in the last segment, Ayub. So I'm not going to go into that, but I agree with you. I had here in my notes that it's going in the wrong direction. And what I mean by wrong direction is you're absolutely right. There needs to be a kind of full overall assessment of how we go about trying to get to the right decisions. I think right now what's happening is that by putting a microscope under decisions, by trying to strive for somewhat perfection, right? That's what VR is trying to do, eliminate errors. We've kind of gone about it the wrong way, created thresholds when there aren't any. If you remember when the season started, Ayub, you remember the directive from referees saying, we're going to let a lot of things go. There's going to be a very high threshold for fouls. And then you see the Diogo Jota incident. So, and that's all because football offers you these very different situations, right? No one incident is the same. But I think we're just going off on the exactly wrong tangent. You've then got some fans saying, well, yeah, well, we weren't given a penalty in that game, and that was very. So it's just this whole kind of tribalism, it's all gone in the wrong direction from my perspective. I think they really, to your point, need to have a look at that and see how do we best get to the right calls? How do we best keep a consistent benchmark in terms of where the decisions should be? What is a penalty? What isn't a penalty? What do we want to see from now on? So I think there is that. And the last thing, if I may, if you'll allow me to be a bit of a sentimental sod, is this podcast. We both discussed when we kind of set up this podcast is that it gives us both, you're passionate about the game, I'm passionate about the game, we're passionate about other sports as well, but just generally sports in general. So I think setting up this podcast, giving us both an opportunity to share our views, sometimes in a very light-hearted manner, sometimes in a very serious manner. We've covered some topics as well. At least for me, has been a real kind of outlet because you know how much I like to consume sports, and quite often all you want to do after consuming sports is talk about it, and we all do it at work, we all do it with friends, and when we go for a cup of tea or whatever it may be. And I think for me, just having this podcast, being able to kind of share this platform with yourself, to kind of talk about the game, talk about incidents, like I said, fun, some serious stuff, all the rest of it has been a kind of a real joy. So that's kind of been what 2023 has meant for me anyway when it comes to football. Try topping that, Ayub.
Well, I echo the sentiments about the podcast. Absolutely. I mean, it's been fantastic. Even though, in the grand scheme of things, it's a very, very small channel. We've got a handful of viewers that watch regularly, but it is something quite special because even if it's 10 people that watch it, there is something quite special about it that it gives us an opportunity. We're talking, but obviously there are other people who are engaging. So it has been something which has been really, really special. I want it to continue for as long as we obviously possibly can make it continue. But onto what was uh I wouldn't say special, but certainly something which was quite traumatic. Now, you don't want to use certain phrases like traumatic tragedy because, in the grand scheme of things, there are a lot of things happening in the world which are much more poignant and much more depressing and tragic. But football is all consuming for me. Leeds United, especially, it's the love of my life and the bane of my life. And I remember when we went down this season. I mean, there was certain inevitability about it, but the euphoria. What I was thinking at the time was the euphoria when we went up, albeit only about 3 seasons ago. So it was the mixture of emotions because after 15, 16 years of being in the doldrums, being in the Championship and League One, to then get to the promised land, it was just the most amazing feeling that I had. And to think that in the space of 3 years, all that I'd aspired to as a fan of football, as a fan of Leeds United, was disintegrating in front of my very eyes. Was extremely depressing. It was tragic from a footballing point of view. It was tragic because it is a club. Leeds United is one of these unique football clubs that it obviously has had its day in the sun. It has been one of the biggest clubs in England, but for a large number of years, it's not been obviously the main feature. So a lot of us fans were so delighted for us to be in the Premier League. We had a halcyon period with Bielsa, but I saw the writing on the wall after the season the Bielsa had in the first season when we finished ninth. Uh, if you check my Twitter feed, you will see that I absolutely uh, uh, was asking that we need to make sure that we we buy players to make sure that we obviously follow up on a great season. It never happened. In a sense, the seeds were sown for our relegation, not last season, the season before. So it's a 2023 as 2020 was. Even though we were in the midst of COVID, it was an amazing, amazing season because I still remember vividly where I was when we gained promotion. The feeling that I had, it's difficult to describe. I mean, it's strange because in a sense, it's it I don't go often to games, but the feeling was a sense of euphoria that I probably not had for a long, long time. And then this feeling it was polar opposite. So it was. It's a year that I want to forget from a footballing point of view. This season we're doing okay. We're doing okay, but it's like you
You
wouldn't be
you
dining.
wouldn't you wouldn't think that from your tweets sometimes.
But that's only because I mean this is Leeds United Football Club. It's a strange thing because I mean the quote that I always use is a famous Bill Shankly quote. I mean for our younger viewers, they probably no idea who this man is. For those who are perhaps connoisseurs of the game or what probably historians of the game, a very very famous Liverpool manager who came up with a quote that football it's not a matter of life and death is much more important than that. And to a certain extent, it is and it isn't. And Leeds United is always been a constant throughout the chaos, sometimes the good times, sometimes the bad times. The one constant is my support for Leeds United, which is why perhaps it means so much their success and why it impacts me so much their failures, their regular failures. So it's that to me is it's probably the low light. It's not a highlight, but it's the low light. But it's the most profound moment that I've had in 2023 in terms of a sporting context. So that's got me really depressed.
Very, very well articulated. I wanted to give you the floor. And I've never met a football fan, Ayub, that's more entitled than you are, I swear. And what I mean by that is in a good way, in a very innocent way. I mean, there are times when you talk about Leeds as though they should be winning leagues regularly, and I mean the Premier League, not the Championship. And I'm just thinking, what's he smoking? But yeah, I've never known someone support their club as religiously and as kind of as diehard as you do. You are probably more pessimistic, I think, than optimistic. I think at least that's how I see it. I think you do sometimes revel in the chaos and the doom and gloom, should I say, which to your point, Leeds provide all too regularly a moment.
Unfortunately,
But
yeah.
right now they're doing okay, like you said. I think they are doing okay. I think they are probably perhaps where they should be on merit, with the at least nearly half the season to go. So we shall see.
Right, that's reflecting on 2023. Let's look forward now. What do you think is going to be maybe a standout story for 2024? Is there any particular player, team, or is there something that you think will be a defining moment in 2024?
I thought long and hard about this as to how I wanted to answer this, and I've got kind of 2 points that I just wanted to maybe cover as we head into the rest of the season. That's what the question was. How do you see, what do you see for the rest of the season, and perhaps heading into next season? And I think there's two main issues for me, or at least two main storylines to keep an eye on. If you remember, before the season started, I suggested that, although I've kind of not changed that because it's so tight to call, but I said that maybe I saw Man City perhaps finishing third. But the main argument that I wanted to push forth was that I thought the league would be incredibly bunched at the end of the season. And right now, the difference between first and fourth is 5 points. Obviously, Arsenal are fourth, Liverpool are top. Yes, City have that game in hand on Liverpool, but they don't matter in the context of this point. I think by the end of the season, Ayub, I think by game week 38 or at the end of game week 38 when the season finishes, I think the gap between first and fourth will be around 10 points, which in the context of the last couple of years, we've had 18 points and 22 points. So that's quite, that's quite a lot of points shaving there where, 10 points is not much at all when you really think about it. But I do think the season with the competitors involved, with the teams involved, taking points off one another as well, quite a competitive league. I do think we're going to end up for a very bunched finish. So I think 10 points would warrant that. The second point, and I do want to hear your thoughts on this, the second point that I have is that I've got 7 teams that I think between now and the start of next season. So that's the key. Between now and the start of next season, we'll have a change in the dugout. And I'm going to run through those teams. The first one's probably quite controversial, but I'm going to go for Unai Emery at Villa. I think there could be an opening that I foresee where he could become, let's just say, somebody well sought after. Unai Emery at Villa. I've got De Zerbi at Brighton. That's been a recurring theme. Ten Hag at United, unfortunately. Eddie Howe at Newcastle. Again, that was one that we picked up between seasons in one of our earlier episodes. Marco Silva at Fulham. If you remember, he came very close to leaving for Saudi. I just feel this summer, irrespective of how Fulham do, I think he may well move on to pastures new. The next one's quite inevitable. Roy Hodgson at Crystal Palace. I think that one's pretty tried and tested. And the last one I'm going to go for is Thomas Frank at Brentford. The reason being is I anticipate Brentford to survive. They're on a horrendous run, but I do anticipate Brentford that they will survive. They will be in the Premier League next season. I think Ivan Toney, they'll probably be looking to hold on to him through January through till May. But I just see Tony obviously leaving next summer. I think Frank as well may well see that as an opportunity to bow out. It may well be because of the domino effect of maybe De Zerbi at Brighton. Could there be perhaps some kind of domino effect where certain coaches are then taking up certain other posts? So those are the 7 definitively. You'll notice that I left Poch out. I think Chelsea will do the decent thing and keep him on board going into next season. But those 7 teams and 7 managers, I think will not be at their respective clubs going into the start of next season.
The Emery one's an interesting one. I mean, I think you're absolutely right because his stock has gone through the roof at this moment in time, and it would make sense for a lot of clubs, a lot of top clubs, to be looking at Unai Emery because I mean he's been an absolute revelation, and I think he's performed I think way above expectations because when he picked up Aston Villa, they were in free fall after Stevie G, so he's done a fantastic job, and I just pick up on maybe a couple of the names that you I think there is a shelf life sometimes, and I think as a coach you've got to realise, because Thomas Frank is a classic example. I almost sort of think that he's the on the graph he's reached his peak, and it's a downward curve. And sometimes as a manager, as a coach, you've just got to think, well, I've taken this club as far as I can do, because now it's almost as if, because his stock at one stage was really, really high. I think perhaps he's not going to be in as in as much demand as he probably would have been maybe a couple of seasons ago. And sometimes as a coach, I think you've got to be smart and clever and just almost sort of anticipate that. Look, can I sort of make these players any better? Can I take this club any farther forward? And I think Frank is perhaps, to be honest, the way things are going, he probably will have a decision taken away from him. Because I've got a feeling that it's not looking too good. Not sure what's going to happen with Tony. There's going to be a lot of interest. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how Tony feels about maybe indebted to Brentford. I don't know how they've been to him, but he may sort of feel that, look, you've supported me, so therefore I'm going to at least give you the remainder of the season. So I'm not too sure about that. If Tony's back for Brentford, that's a huge shot in the arm, and maybe the performances will pick up because he's such a quality player. I'm going to add another name to this, but there is a caveat. I've got a feeling that if Liverpool win the league, which I'm hoping that they do because it's a team that I've backed, even though he's an honourable man and he always honours his contracts, I have a feeling that Klopp may just say, thank you, but I think it's time to move on. It will be amicable. But I just got a feeling that if they win the league, in a sense, it gives a perfect opportunity for Klopp to go. I do think that he has an inkling to manage Germany. Not immediately. He's been at Liverpool, what, 7 years, 8 years? That's a reasonable amount of time. And again, sometimes it's knowing when the right time to leave. And I think if he wins the league, I think it probably might just be an opportunity for him to leave. I think Salah will leave, and maybe there's going to be a bit of a change at Liverpool. But certainly, I do see that. People keep saying to me, no, he's an honourable man. He'll honour his contract. But I'm not too sure.
Yeah, just on the Germany thing, we've discussed this before, haven't we, Ayub? If you remember, I thought if Hansi Flick took Germany to the European Championships, hosted in Germany, and then Germany fell well short of expectations, I could see the storyline how it could shift because Jurgen Klopp's thought of incredibly highly in Germany. Hansi Flick would have lost his job. That would have been his second tournament that he would have had managing Germany where they've fallen short. And there it becomes quite obvious who you then go after, right? Jurgen Klopp, well revered, well respected within Germany and abroad and in footballing parlance. So I could see that. The fact that they moved early off Hansi Flick after that defeat in the friendlies and moved for Nagelsmann, I just think upsets the timeline. Nagelsmann would really have to fail at the European Championships for them not to give him another chance or for him to continue with Germany. So I actually think the Germany thing right now, to your point, Klopp may well take a year out and just bide his time because that job will be there for him at some point. I just think actually, if they were to win the Premier League, Ayub, and you floated this theory out there, and it was an interesting one, it did take me by surprise. I actually think he would like to have a tilt at the Champions League. He'll think, other than Man City, to whom Liverpool can compete, competed well this season, have competed well with them in previous seasons and in Champions Leagues. He'll think, other than Man City, who's the one juggernaut out there that we've got to be really worried about? Liverpool, if they qualify for the Champions League next season, which it looks like they will, although it's still early days, I just think he'll feel like I've got another title, I've got another Champions League title run, let's say, in me as well as in these players, especially because they'll probably get a chance to strengthen the squad somewhat. Don't forget, they had a bid for Caicedo. They spent a little bit of money after that. So they've got a bit of money. If you win the title, more money comes in. And there were some rumors about Kylian Mbappe. So we'll see if that comes about. I'm sure you'd be happy. One of your favorite clubs signing one of your favorite players. But yeah, look, it's an interesting theory. I just think he'll fancy maybe perhaps picking off another European trophy before his time at Liverpool is done. But we're probably getting a little ahead of ourselves as well, to be honest.
Well, okay. Well, that's our thoughts, viewers. We'd love to hear from you on all matter of subjects, on officiating, on Klopp. Will he leave if they win the league? That's what I think. I'm not sure what you think, but if Liverpool fans are out there, which I'm sure they are, let us know in the comments. Okay, so on that note, I think we'll call it a day. There's things to do this evening.
I was going to say I'm interested to hear what your lad has to say, what your youngest lad has to say about your theory about Jurgen Klopp.
I'll wait for his comment. I won't speak to him directly. We just we communicate via the YouTube channel that we have on the podcast. All right, so
clearly,
he'll give me his thoughts.
Yeah, clearly a very dysfunctional household that you operate over there.
It's that's the way I like it. All right. On that note, as always, it's a pleasure to have you watch this show. So thank you as always. Enjoy your weekend. It should be okay. So have a great weekend, and until the next time, stay safe. See you soon. Ta-ta for now.